Hi, everybody. My name is David McLeod. I am your Life Mastery Coach, and I would like to welcome you to Magnificence in Motion. This is my brand new program that I started up this year, and this is only the second episode. And today we're going to be talking about the journey inward. Now, let me just give you a little bit of background here. When I think of the journey inward, I think of introspection, which to me is a gateway to self-discovery. It's a way to uncover who I really am beyond those roles and labels and expectations of the world. So by turning your attention inward, you can learn to understand your thoughts, words, actions, emotions, and all the patterns that you engage in one way or another. And this allows you to enhance your self-awareness and your authenticity. This process illuminates your unique strengths and gifts while also revealing areas that might benefit from some healing and growth. As you connect more deeply with your inner self, you unlock clarity and purpose, which brings about courage to live in alignment with your highest potential. So in a world that relentlessly attracts attention outward, you got all those little things out there that are drawing your attention away. Introspection empowers you to anchor in your truth and create a life rooted in meaning and peace. So for this episode of Magnificence in Motions, I'm hosting a new friend, Kathleen McPhillips. She's a life master teacher, a Reiki master, an author, a multidimensional healer, a soul activation practitioner, and a retreat facilitator. And I don't know if I mentioned it in there, but she's also a yoga instructor. So with over two decades of experience teaching yoga and guiding retreats, Kathleen empowers individuals to embrace their divinity and live with purpose, gratitude, and peace. So welcome, Kathleen, and thank you for joining me for today's episode. And thank you for
David.
Putting up with all the ridiculous messing around that happened at the beginning.
We're human.
That's right. Yeah. Well, so thank you so much for joining me today. I know that, we've been trying to get this episode going for, I think it's about 3 or 4 months now. And finally, the stars all aligned, and here we are, and we're going to have this really fabulous conversation. And I guess the way I like to start conversations like this, I like to start by asking you a question.
Okay.
The idea of inward journey, of introspection, whatever word you choose for it, is something that's obviously important to you because you decided that's what you wanted to talk about. But I guess my question is, what happened in your life to make this such an important topic for you?
My life was a mess. It was a mess.
Good. I can't wait to find the details.
I was always searching. I've been searching since I was young, very young. And there were times that I was really connected to my spiritual life and in the Catholic Church and my own prayer life. And when I was in my first marriage ended, and then I married someone else a couple of years later, and it wasn't a good relationship at all. And I woke up one morning right before I married the second marriage, and I had ruptured a disc in my in my lower spine. And I had ruptured discs since I was 13, but this one, when it blew, left me with drop foot. And I've had that. I don't like to call it disability, but I've had that since 1995.
Okay, so
I wear a device on my leg.
What that is, I don't really understand. You mentioned a word that
my foot pretty much
foot.
is like this.
I see.
It can't pick up, and I can't really move it from side to side.
Okay,
I have no movement in my toes. Yeah. So anyway, I've been wearing that device since 1995, and it crippled me in every way possible. And I ended up being on all kinds of medication, 8 different kinds, as a matter of fact. I married this man when I was on all those medications. And one day I put weight on, I got heavy. I was a mess. And 3 people in like 6 months' time encouraged me to do yoga. But my massage therapist at the time specifically knew the yogi and directed me to him. And when I walked into that yoga school, because it was a traditional school of yoga, and when I walked into that yoga school, I felt like I breathed life into my body for the first time in so many years. And by that time, I had had the drop foot for 7 years. And it completely defined me. It defined me. It just did. I lost my my kind of corporate job where I dressed up nice and everything, and all of that came screeching to a halt because this device was so big. I had to wear 2 different size sneakers, and it just, yeah, I was a mess. So anyway, once I walked into that yoga studio or the yoga school, and I breathed, it really, really breathed life. It awakened something in me unlike anything in my life. And that's when my journey inward began. Before that, and everybody has their own journey to make. Before that, through my Catholic upbringing, everything was putting my energy out. My prayers were out. Everything was out. God's out there somewhere, probably behind the pretty cloud. And you know what I mean? and what happened was with the yoga school, I was so limited in my ability that I listened more to the teachings than I did focus on the physical. I did what I could, but I felt like I was a dry, parched sponge, and every word the yogi uttered was the water. It filled me. It filled me and changed my life forever. And I remember saying to him one day, speaking of the journey inward, that I was kind of a little uncertain or afraid of doing deep meditation. And he said, "There's nothing to be afraid of." He said, "I will guide you." And he did. And meditation became the greatest part of my life, the most important part of my life, the thing that I looked forward to more than anything, just going in. But then it wasn't just about meditation. Then he started giving me self-study questions every day, because I ended up being his program director, because my enthusiasm and joy was so contagious. It was just bringing all these people into the yoga school. At one point, we had a little over 200 full-time students there.
That's beautiful.
And yeah. And so it was the self-study reflection questions that really, really took me on my journey inward to really unravel.
No, I say that's really beautiful. And I mean, I know that I've had a similar journey, and I'll share a little bit of the detail of that here in just a moment. But first, I want to say thank you to the folks who are here on the live presentation. I want to say thank you for being here. And if you have comments or questions, please feel free to post them in the chat, and we'll do our best to respond to them. We also are interested in your perspective. If you hear something that resonates for you, please share with us how that might be true for you in your life as well. Because that
they're my
helps us
yoga students.
Well, look at that.
They're from the Adirondacks.
It's the joy and the enthusiasm that attracted them in. So yeah. Anyway, Lisa, yes, I see you have your hand raised. I'm not going to be taking any vocal questions, but if you want to just put something in the chat, we'll do our best to answer it. Okay. So I was just going to say, you know, that the story about multiple marriages, I can totally relate to that. You know, I had my first marriage, which I engaged in because it was the thing to do according to society. Uh, I found a woman who seemed to be the right woman for me at the time. And I realized, you know, well, there was a lot of things that happened. I'm not going to go into the details, but basically that marriage ended after about 16 and a half years. But we had produced 3 amazing, beautiful children out of that. And I realized today that that was the reason for that marriage, because those children had to come into being, and somehow the 2 of us were supposed to do that. Well, then in 2000, I guess it was, I married a second woman. Now, this woman, you know, I really loved her. We had a great connection, but she was a psychotherapist. And I think in some way I was one of her projects. I wasn't her client. We never had a therapist client relationship, but there was no way that she could not be in psychotherapist mode, you know? And I will say this, she was very, very helpful to me in many, many different ways, in uncovering a lot of my own dysfunctional belief systems, in going to workshops that really helped me grow. But at one point I came to the realization during, it was another workshop that I attended called Healing the Mother Wound. When I came to the realization that the only reason I had married my second wife was because she wanted to get married. I was stuck in that people pleaser mode. I was doing it because she wanted it, not because I wanted it. And so I was stuck in a quandary. I was stuck in a very difficult position once I made that realization. Do I tell her, or do I kind of keep it to myself and try and make the best of this marriage? Well, given that I had started this path of awakening and personal growth, integrity started to become a pretty important thing in my life. And I thought, I cannot continue this relationship and not tell her the truth. Or tell her the truth as far as I understand it. So one day I decided I have to have a conversation. And I shared that with her. And of course, that was the beginning of the end. Because she didn't, you know, she said, well, if you're going to marry me based on a lie, then we can't stay married, you know, on the continuation of that lie. And I said, I totally understand. I'm sorry that it has to be that way. I love you. I mean, I really would like for us to make this work, but if that's not going to work, then it's not going to work. So, you know, different circumstances from yours, but still entering into relationships based on belief systems that were born out of, pardon me, out of my childhood, out of the conditioning, out of my religious beliefs, all of that. And anyway, our marriage ended in 2006, and I've been single ever since. So I'm available, ladies. You know. Anyway, well, you know, I'm now 72 years old. I really don't think it's likely that I'm going to end up with another wife, but I don't see any point in not having a sense of humor about it.
Right.
You know, what good is life if you can't laugh at yourself and you can't have fun with all of the stupid mistakes you've made?
Yeah, and that's where we learn. Like my first marriage, we had 2 children, and they are the loves of my life. They are and always will be. They're beautiful humans, and I'm so proud of who they are. And you know, but with back to the yoga school, I was there for 6 years. I studied for 6 years, and I ended up having breast cancer, and then I broke a rib from the radiation, and then I broke my left foot, my drop foot. So I lost my job at the yoga school. And when I was stuck in my apartment, my 1-bedroom apartment there for 8 months, it took for my foot to heal, I did nothing but meditate and journal and visit with the students that came from the school. There was just this beautiful flow of students that came to see me. And so I had no job. I was going through a horrible divorce. My body was broken. And when I felt better and strong enough, I asked my aunt if I could come up and visit her in the Adirondacks. So I drove up there, and each day I would sit from early morning until later in the afternoon on the dock, just overlooking the lake. And I knew that's where I needed to go to heal. So it took a year, but a year later, I moved to the Adirondacks. My kids were in their early 20s, so they were living on their own. And I moved there alone with my little dog. And I lived alone in this cabin, near on Lake Simon Pond. And it was very, very, there was a lot of solitude that time of year because the summer camps were all closed up. So I did nothing but my yoga practice, meditation, and journaling. By that time, I'd had so much experience with self-reflection that I really, when I look back, I did 7 years of really intense self-reflection.
That's awesome.
And yeah. And every day I walked in the woods, and it was in the woods that I really healed, because I saw the beauty in all the imperfections. I saw the beauty in the rotting tree that created a home for the woodpeckers or food for the woodpeckers. And every day I felt like God took me by the hand every day and showed me that there's beauty in imperfection. Because by then I had the left drop foot, my breast was carved up. I felt very broken, but the Adirondacks are known for healing, to be a very healing place for people to go. But I have to say, the people, especially the people that I ended up teaching yoga to, once they found out I was into yoga, people started asking me to teach. And I ended up teaching in Long Lake, Tupper Lake, and Saranac Lake. And between the three, I had over 100 students a week that I was teaching. And
that's great.
It was like, when the students are ready, the teacher appears. Well, I didn't know that that's what I was going to be doing up there. At first, when I was asked, I said, no, that's not why I'm here. I just need to, so this 1 year commitment that I made ended up being 3. 1 year was not enough. And I not only healed, but I really blossomed, and I grew to be the teacher that I am today. And I'm so grateful to my loyal students up there, because I still teach them on Zoom on Tuesday mornings. And the people healed me, the mountains, the lakes, the rivers healed me. And it was just the most magnificent journey to really, it was the journey of discovery. And for the first time in my life, I was in total alignment with who I really am, instead of who everybody else expected me to be.
That's a great feeling, isn't it?
It's so liberating.
Yeah.
And it's one of the programs that I do with people today, Finding Your True Self, or I was calling it for a while, Transform Your Life. But really, that's what it is. It's a guided self-study that I do with them. And it's not long. It's usually only about 12 sessions, because I feel like a laser surgeon. I go in and I just direct them. Okay, let's look at this one now. And it's great. All done. Yeah.
So there's a few things that you've said that I would just like to address. The first,
sure.
You talked about the broken body.
Mm-hmm.
And you also spoke earlier on about being a mess. I am a mess.
Mm-hmm.
I am broken.
Mm-hmm.
Notice how back in the day, I'm sure you don't do this now, but how
No.
you were identifying with your conditions, identifying with the roles you were playing, identifying with your your disease or whatever.
Yeah, it defined me.
Yeah, you use that phrase, it defined me. And
Yes.
that's not really true. It didn't define you. I mean, you just allowed yourself to identify. I would say that's more accurate.
Right.
And most of us do that. Most of us do that in our lives. We don't realize that we don't necessarily realize that we're doing it. In fact, most of us do it unconsciously.
Right.
But if you ask, I've done this. I've had this really beautiful exercise that I've created that I do with people all the time. It's just a repeated question. I'll pair up with somebody and I'll say, okay, I'm gonna be the interviewer, and you just simply respond with whatever's true for you in the moment, as concisely as possible. No story, just answer the question truthfully. So I ask, who are you? And invariably, when people have not played this game before, the first thing they say is, I'm Kathleen. And then I say, oh, well, thank you for that. And who are you? And it's hardly ever the case that someone immediately says, oh, I'm Kathleen a second time. Usually they'll say something like, I'm a woman. Thank you so much for that. And who are you? And we'll just keep doing this. I'm a mother. I'm a yoga teacher. I'm a poet. You notice how we pick up on the roles that we play in life. And I just keep going. And what you're doing is you're peeling back layer after layer.
Yeah.
There might be some repeats, but that's all right. Well, eventually people get down to something really cool, like I am love. I am serenity.
Yeah. My teacher did that to me. Actually, the yogi. Yeah, I had been there for about, I don't know, 3 or 4 years.
So you know the experience.
Oh, yeah. He said, he wrote it down on a piece of paper. Who am I? So I typed up like 3 pages and I handed it in to him the next day, and he pushed it back to me and he wrote down again, who am I? And he just kept doing it and doing it and doing it until all you have left is I am.
That's right. And that is the beauty. Yeah. In fact, if you go even a step further, you can just simply say, I.
Yeah.
There is no need for the other part of the statement.
Right. Right.
And I think the reason I'm bringing this up is most people, I would say 90% of the people on this planet have never even contemplated the question, let alone taken it deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. You and I are in this book with the Wellness Universe, the Wellness Universe Guide to Complete Self-Care, Volume 5. And in my chapter, I talked about an actual process that I do for myself. It's a meditation process. And it's called the Unfurled Lotus Meditation. It basically takes that same idea. And as I'm doing it, I'm imagining this beautiful lotus in my, my belly area, with my eyes closed, and as each question gets answered, another petal opens up. And after a while, I keep doing this until the entire lotus is wide open, and all there is that beautiful golden blue essence of David in the middle. And it has no words, it has no description, it just is, you know?
Absolutely.
So I think this whole thing is really, really important, and I'm so glad that you had the opportunity to do it. And by the way, I'm going to give you a title for a new book, God Took Me by the Hand.
Good one. It's true. I never felt alone. I wasn't afraid living up there. I felt very protected. And I didn't know anybody when I moved up there because my aunt and uncle, who lived down the road, they had left because it was the fall when I moved up there, and they left. So because they closed up their camp, and so, but it didn't take long for me to make friends, and I did some volunteer work, and I just really, really discovered myself. And it's like taking a big ball of yarn and just unraveling it a little bit more each day until you come down to the nothing where you find all and everything.
Yeah, it's something that can't be explained in words. It has to be experienced. That's the challenge of it.
Yeah.
But I love that. I've used the image of the unfurled lotus is one image. The onion peeling, that's another one. And now you've got the ball of yarn, which that's a great metaphor as well. And so what you're talking about here is the power of solitude, the incredible gift that one can get just simply by being still, silent, and alone.
Yes. And even if it's only 5 minutes a day, if that's all you have, just be in the quiet and the stillness of yourself, because that's where your treasure lies. Your treasure is within you. Everything that you need is within you. That's I used to, before I went on that journey, I used to call my sisters and my friends and ask their advice about everything. I'd ask all of them. And it's like now
and no two of them have the same advice either.
It just comes from within. That's where your guide is. That's your inner GPS there, right there. And so the more we sit in the quiet and the stillness of ourselves, the more we quiet the outer noise to reveal the inner wisdom, to reveal your inner light, your inner guidance. And even though I talk a lot about that time in my life, because I moved back here in 2010 into the Hudson Valley. In a couple of years, first of all, I met the most wonderful man, because I didn't date for almost 6 years. I didn't date for a long time. I just worked on myself, and I became what I wanted to experience in a relationship. And that's why I attracted, and I learned a lot about the law of attraction. I learned a lot about manifestation. And what I teach my students is that usually we're manifesting what we don't want. We're so busy thinking about what we don't want that we create what we don't want. And so I met the most wonderful man in the world for me. We ended up getting married. But then I was diagnosed with multiple myeloma. Oh, no. And after living here for a few years. And I was told that it's incurable and all that good stuff. So I did my research, and I realized by the time they discovered what it was, I had no choice but to go through treatment. So I went 6 months of treatment, and then I had a stem cell transplant. But when I was diagnosed, I was terrified, of course, but I was more terrified because I wasn't taking any medications or anything for years. So I was more terrified of that, of taking that medication, the chemo and everything else that went with it. And so what I did was I blessed all the medication. So I think this is really important for anybody that's making that journey, is I blessed all the medication. And I affirmed that it would only do what it needed to do to help me reclaim my radiant health. It would do no harm to any of my organs or the rest of my body. And then one of my friends from the Adirondack did this picture of an old apothecary with an owl, and I hung that. It was all about healing. I hung that on the cabinet where the medication was. And then when I had my stem cell transplant, I made my room in the hospital like a temple. I brought my crystals. I brought pictures of ascended masters and angels. And I just surrounded myself with all this. And I knew I wasn't going to die from it. I knew that I still had work to do. I had a lot of life left to live. So when I went back for my recheck 3 months later, that was March 2019, I was told, it looks like you're cancer free. So let's talk about maintenance. And I said, what maintenance? I said, you just told me I'm cancer free. and they said, "Oh no, this is incurable and you need to do chemo for the rest of your life." I said, "No,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
I'm not doing
Don't
that."
you love big pharma?
I just, it's such a, I mean, listen, it has its purpose. I mean, it got me to a point where I was cancer free,
Right.
but I also see the side where,
Right.
yeah. And like I said, everybody's got to do what they need to do. I have a very strong mind.
I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I do. I have a very, very strong mind. I know how to use it. And
Mhm.
I knew that I would be okay moving forward, not terrified that I wasn't doing what they wanted me to do.
Right.
So then we moved back to the Adirondacks and we lived there for 3 years. I knew that's where I needed to be to heal again. And I did. I've been good ever since. Yeah.
Oh, that's really awesome. Well,
Mhm.
first of all, I honor you for having the wherewithal to simply uh, deal with your own issue in the best possible way that works for you.
Mhm.
I'm also sorry that you had to go through that, but on the other hand, maybe you did this in order to gain this awareness, in
Mhm.
order to gain this understanding and share that wisdom with other people.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, you talked about the truth is within you and all this kind of stuff. It was almost like you were channeling some lines from a song I wrote quite a few years ago, and I just went to take a look, and I'm going to drop the lyrics of that song right in here, and you can see for yourself. This is from my song. It's called Chrysomancer. It's
Mhm.
off my album Sasta Mandala, and
Okay.
I'll put the link to that album there too, so you can go check that out.
The
Anybody who
truth
wants
is
to look
within
at
you.
it.
The power is within you. The sage is within you. The bliss. Yes, absolutely beautiful.
So
Beautiful.
yeah, if you want to check out that album, you can go to my
Yes.
Bandcamp website. So yeah, I love doing music. You talk about, well, meditation. For me, music is a form of meditation.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Um, I can write music like eyes closed and it just comes. It's
Mm-hmm.
like there's this constant flow of beautiful music that comes through me.
Mm-hmm.
I won't guarantee that I always capture it the way it comes through, but I do my best. And
Mm-hmm.
anyway, so that's one thing I love to do, and poetry is another thing I love to do. So bringing the
Yeah.
two together like this was a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so let's go back to this idea of um, solitude. I
Mm-hmm.
think people are afraid of being alone.
Yes. Yes, they are.
Or let me rephrase that. I don't think people are afraid of being alone. I think they're afraid of being lonely, and there's a difference. You know,
Mm-hmm.
there's a big difference between alone and lonely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Lonely
Yeah,
is
you
just a
can be.
judgment you have about being alone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
say some
Mm-hmm.
more about that. How do you encourage people to find solitude without loneliness?
Well, I learned through um, one of my marriages that there's nothing more lonely than being in a relationship with someone who just isn't there for you.
Right.
And we really are never alone. Um, I know people who leave the TV on all day long because they said, I can't stand being alone. But we never are alone. We
Right.
all have our angels and our spirit guides with us throughout our lives. And I really emphasize that with, in my retreats, in my writing, in my teaching, that we need to remember that we are never alone. And as a matter of fact, now with the change in the frequency and the vibration on the planet, now the veil is lifting, the veil is thinning,
Yes,
and
that's right.
more and more people are becoming more aware that they're not alone, and it's nothing to be afraid of. These angels and guides are with us throughout our lifetimes, and they're here to serve us. It's just we forget they're there. They don't forget us. We forget we have them, and we forget to tap into them. We forget to ask them for help. We forget to ask them for comfort. And they're very real. They're very real. And it's an important part of our journey as a divine being having a human experience.
Yeah, I agree totally. But here's one thing I've learned for myself is even if you don't necessarily believe in angels or any of
Right.
those other beings, the truth is once you get to know the truth of who you really are, you begin to understand that you are that spiritual essence, and that, as you described, having a human experience. When you get to that place, it's easy now, well, certainly much easier anyway, but I find it easy to connect in with the source of all that energy and therefore feel connected to all that is.
Yes,
And once you have
absolutely.
that connection to all that is, it doesn't matter whether there are angels or not, because we're all one.
Yes,
It's
absolutely.
not just a bumper sticker, as what I keep telling people. It's an actual reality. We are all one, even though we have this illusion of separateness as we go about our busy daily lives.
And that is the whole purpose of the practice of yoga. So
Right.
yoga, the Sanskrit term for yoga is yuj, and that is union. And
Exactly.
once we experience the union of the body and the breath, and then the body, the breath, the emotions, the mind, the spirit, then the next phase is we realize that we are one with all and everything. That my energy affects the energy on the other side of the planet.
Yep, absolutely.
And when we are in a state of love and gratitude, this raises our frequency to the highest level that affects it. It's so expansive. It's beyond our comprehension to understand the power of the heart and our living in a state of gratitude and how that changes the world around you. I like to remind my students that when you're in that place, if you walk into a grocery store, that energy is expanding all to everybody there in the grocery store, whether they're aware of it or not. It is there. And so to live in a state of gratitude, I think is even more powerful because love has so many definitions. But gratitude is gratitude. And there's always something to be grateful for. And I like to say that gratitude changes the landscape of your life.
Right.
It changes everything. And even in your darkest times, just look at the simple things in your life and allow your heart to fill with gratitude. It changes everything.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned about the heart space and expanding that. I just recently purchased a product from Heart Math called what do you call it? I can't remember the proper. It's a coherence app. So you basically just connect it to your iPhone. There's an app on the iPhone, and there's a little thing that attaches to your ear, a little sensor, and it monitors your heart rate. And you sit for like 10 or 15 minutes, however long you want. And the idea is to increase coherence between the heartbeat and the brain waves and the, what's the other one? Nervous system. And so I just got this and I've been doing it for not even a week yet. And already I'm noticing a huge difference.
Yeah.
So it's one thing to meditate, but when you've got a device, basically a feedback device, your phone, and it can tell you how you're doing, and you can now start focusing your attention on your heart, start learning how to become more coherent. Oh, it's awesome.
Love is all that matters.
Ultimately, love is all that is.
Yes, it is. Absolutely. Everything is about love. And it's how we love and how we live, how we love, and how we allow love to come to us, how receptive we are to love. And so all of this led me even further on a journey where I all of a sudden just felt like I really needed a teacher, because I've been teaching for so long. And so I just put that out there. I was like, I really would have this feeling that I need a teacher. So I ended up studying multidimensional healing with a teacher for 2 years. And that has taken my practice and everything to a whole nother level, realizing how multidimensional we all are, and how important our energetic field and our chakra system is to our being. And so yeah, there's always more. There's always more. We just continue to go within, and there's always more, because when we realize that what we're tapping into when we go within is infinite, then there's infinite possibilities. We're actually limitless when we understand that we are infinite. And it's time for humanity to really awaken to that divine infinite self and rise into your gifts and be empowered with that knowledge of being an infinite being, and that we are all connected, and we all matter. Everyone matters. And we're all, it's almost like we're all a little piece of the puzzle of creation. So
and
we want to do our best.
But at the same time, we are the puzzle.
That's true. Exactly. Yep. Exactly.
It's like a hologram.
Yeah.
It's like a hologram.
Yeah. So
I like to tell people and remind them, you talk about love is all it is and so forth. For me, one thing that I have learned for myself, and I believe it's true for all humans actually, is every thought, word, action, and emotion is inspired at its deepest level by a desire to give or receive love. Mm-hmm. Now, from the outside, it might look dysfunctional, but that doesn't change the inner motivation of the person who's trying to either get love or give love.
Right.
And when we all raise ourselves to a high enough vibration level, when we understand the truth of who we are, then the quality of the love that we give and receive will go up as well.
Exactly.
Exactly. So this is a choice that we all get to make.
Yes.
And part of our journey, as I understand it now, I can't say that this is true for everybody, but I know it seems to be true for me, and it seems to be true for a lot of people. I knew my true spiritual essence before I manifested on this physical plane. But then in the process of being born into this physical world, I forgot all that stuff. And plus, I had all this conditioning and indoctrination and everything else that was going on all around me, trying to shape me into something that fit into somebody else's idea of how it was supposed to be. Yes. Well, that went on for 40 years before I finally said enough. And it was that enough when I realized that this is not working. Now, I had already forgotten everything that I was supposed to, come in here for. So I had to go through a process of pulling apart all those dysfunctional beliefs to get down to the truth and to remember who I really am, so that I could remember why I'm really here.
Yes.
And that's taken me another 30 years.
Yeah, I was in my 50s when this all happened.
I know.
Yeah. I'm going to be 70 this year. So yeah, it takes some time.
Happy birthday, girl.
It takes time. It's a journey. We're all here to live and to learn and to grow. Right. And I like to remind everyone that you are the creator of your life by what you think, what you say, and what you do.
Exactly right.
So make it the best. Make it exceptional. Make it magnificent. Make it magnificence in motion.
By the way, I would add in one more thing.
Okay.
You are the creator of your life also in the way you feel.
Yes.
And it's true that sometimes feelings just happen, but we have the choice of whether we to continue to stay in those feelings or not. And I can also, now that I'm learning more about this, I can bring forth the kinds of feelings that I want in my life by focusing on gratitude, by focusing on serenity, by focusing on kindness and compassion. If I focus my attention on those things, those are the energies that show up in my feelings, and that then spreads out to the world.
Right.
So thoughts, words, actions, and emotions, they all contribute.
Yes. And sometimes the emotions just pop in because of, like for instance, my husband and I got some concerning news about his health a little over a week ago. I think it was, like 2 weeks ago. And we were both afraid. We were weepy, and I started to feel anxiety, and I really don't ever experience anxiety, but I found myself going there. So I ended up doing what my teacher told me years and years ago. If you're experiencing something like that, go into your meditation and invite it in. And
yeah, that sounds counterintuitive, but think about it for a
yes,
moment.
invite it in, bring it in. So then what I did was like another ball of yarn. I'm like, okay, so what are you anxious about? Okay, and if that happens, then what? And then what? And then what? And I actually had heard about a podcast, and the woman was talking about inviting it in and asking how old it was, like it's a child, one of your children. So I did that, and right away it said 8 years old. I was like, 8 years old. And then the memory came back of something that happened in our family. And once I saw that and I looked at it, all of a sudden the anxiety just it disappeared.
Yeah, it's
So
interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
yes, it really, really is. It's fascinating to be able to look at these emotions that we have and to face them head on, and they lose their power.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's just
Well,
life's
one
a
of the
journey.
things, yeah, one of the things that I think people should understand here, or hopefully they'll take away from our conversation, is what we're talking about is self-healing.
Yes.
And healing to me is nothing more than a process of returning to wholeness.
Yeah.
And that means bringing into play my heart, my body, my mind, and my soul. You can't just focus on one without the other. You have to bring them all in play together.
Right.
So Kathleen, tell me, what's your experience of how self-healing ripples out to heal more than just ourselves?
As I healed myself, I shared that process. And one of the things that I've always done with my students and with, in my retreats is I've always been completely and totally honest and vulnerable. I'm no different than anybody else. And I share my stories because when I open up and share my story, it creates a safe space for everyone else to share theirs.
Exactly
And
right.
yeah, so that's what I do when I'm teaching, when I write, when I facilitate retreats. It's all about, and that boils down to just being my authentic self.
Yeah. It's funny that word vulnerability, the moment we hear it, we immediately feel that sense of vulnerability. I'm not invulnerable. I'm not Superman or Superwoman. You
Right.
know,
Right.
all vulnerability means is that you are allowing yourself to be seen fully. And
Yeah.
in the moment that you do that, there is a risk, of course, there's a risk that somebody might not like what they see.
Right.
Somebody might make a judgment about it.
Mm-hmm.
And Lord knows judgments are the one thing we really don't like at all. We can tolerate almost anything else, but when we hear judgments, negative judgments about ourselves, that's when we tend to get ego mind action going and stuff. We get defensive. But the real truth is, the more vulnerable I can be, the less likely you are to judge me.
Mm-hmm.
It's counterintuitive. It's not what we normally expect.
Right.
It's when I'm defending myself, when I'm pretending to be something I'm not. That's when the judgments really come, and that's when the attacks really come. But when I open up and speak the truth, all of a sudden that just tends to die out.
Right.
And what's really funny, human beings have got the best truth radar I've ever seen. We should call it LIDAR, because I can tell when you're lying like instantly. That's so there's really not much point in lying, because you can't really fool anybody.
Right.
You might as well be truthful and honest and open and vulnerable and say, here's who I am. Like it or leave it.
Yeah. And the leave it brings us to another teaching in the practice of yoga, is non-attachment.
Right.
Have no attachment to, and that's huge, is having, no attachment. And I think a lot of that is what I learned when I was in the yoga school, and I was so limited in my abilities. I really learned those higher teachings of non-attachment, non-judgment, just all of that. It just, you let it go. And I remember Swamiji used to say, forgive and forget, forgive and forget, forgive and forget. And it's true. It's not just about forgiving, but forget it. Let it go.
Yeah. Well, and it's okay if you can't forget. Don't judge yourself if you're not able to live up to some of these teachings, right?
Right.
That just adds a whole nother level of junk onto you. Now, I want to come back to this attachment piece, because I think that's a really, really important topic. And I'm sure we could have a complete discussion about that on its own. But one of the things that I know that some people have a problem with, well, how do I not be attached to something, especially if I have a really big, major goal that I want to accomplish? So on some level, you have to be attached to the goal, but you want to be unattached. So there's a bit of a paradox there, and I'm going to throw it in your court to explain how to deal with that. I mean, I know how I would do it, but you go ahead.
Well, if you're talking about setting a goal, let's say wanting to write a book, okay, setting the goal, okay. I like to call it living in the flow. I don't like to push a lot. I find that if I stay centered and I'm doing my practice, things just flow to me. Doors and windows open. But if I go around trying to open doors that are closed, open windows that are closed, all of that, then I bring almost like a certain form of suffering or whatever, or a little bit of misery. And so I learned a long time ago, if I do have a goal, I think anymore I don't really have goals. My thing is to share my life experience with the world around me. And if it resonates with people, wonderful. I really feel committed in assisting humanity in their awakening. And I just trust in the process of my life at this point. I really don't set goals anymore. It's like, what? Life tends to flow like a river for me. And
Well, okay. I get it. You are a go with the flow girl. That's great. I like that. And sometimes there's going to be something that you want to get done, and you're going to have to do it.
Right.
And so I guess the way I would approach this, all right, whatever it is you have to get done, or you think you have to get done, it's a goal. It's an objective. It's something that you want to get from this point where you are today to that point down there where that goal is complete. The secret, I think, is to set the goal, but not necessarily have an attachment to the way that goal gets accomplished.
Yes. That's a better way of
how
saying
long
it.
it's going to take, you know?
Yeah. That's a better way of saying it. Yes.
That's how I do it, because
Yeah.
I want to be able to set goals. I want to be able to have intentions for the year and all that kind of stuff. And I want to be able to let them go.
Right. Yes.
So there's that beautiful dichotomy that happens between those two things. And, I think on one way or another, we all have to come to grips with that.
Right. Right.
But if you're really attached to the goal, then you may be attached to the way someone else is performing in order to help you achieve that goal. And that might make you less pleasant to deal with, shall we say, with regard to that person. On the other hand, if you are open and you're willing to trust that the people that you've brought on board to help you, that they know what they're doing and they'll do it in the best way they can, then guess what? They will have a happy and joyous time of it, and they will bring forth something that you didn't even expect that might be even better than what you had.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Exactly.
Well, Kathleen, this has been a really fabulous conversation. I want to thank you for joining me today.
You're welcome.
We've talked a lot about yoga in generic terms, but not necessarily a yoga practice in the sense of getting out on the mat and doing specific poses and stuff. It's more about the philosophical side of yoga, I think.
Yes. And sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say that anybody can do yoga. Anybody. And I always felt like the yoga magazines did a great disservice to the practice of yoga by putting people who are putting their foot behind their head. And, people look at that and they say, I can never do that. I'm not going to try yoga. But I think because I had this physical challenge, that in itself was a vulnerability that allowed people to say, you know what, if she can do it, maybe I can do it too.
Yeah. No, and you're absolutely right. It's, I remember when I first started doing yoga, there were certain poses I could not do. I just simply couldn't do them. But what I discovered is my body was willing to stretch and shape and adjust itself, so that after a couple of years, all of a sudden that thing I couldn't do in the beginning was something I could do now. Now, I still can't put my head behind my ears, and I don't think I'd want to anyway. But, I'll leave that to the young bucks who really want to show off and do their fancy yoga treatment.
Yeah.
But so anyway, Kathleen, I want to ask you, do you have any final words you'd like to share before I close us out for the day? I mean, I know we got it messed up at the beginning, but I want to give a couple of extra minutes to make sure that we close out properly.
When you take the time each day to just go within and sit in the quiet of yourself, if you're sitting in a chair, light a candle. If you're walking in nature by yourself, no phones, nothing to disrupt you. Just be with yourself. We very rarely in this life, especially in the world today, get to just be. But remember, when an infant comes into the world, that infant is just being, and everyone around is filled with joy. This little one that's just being brings so much joy to the world. And that was you, and that is you. So just be. Allow your magnificence to just be. Let your light shine, and know that you are never alone. You are always loved. And that there's something inside of you that is perfect, and that is your infinite divine self.
Beautiful. Just be. Can't really think of any better advice than that. But so I want to thank you, Kathleen, for being here.
Thank you, David.
All of you folks for joining on the live call. I would like to remind you that I have recordings of this and all my other episodes on my website at magnifessence.com. And I'm going to just drop a link there for the website. Also, you'll notice I've thrown in a special code there. It's membership-jan-25. If you're interested in one of the memberships that I have on my site, there's a 30% off right there. But guess what, folks? It gets even better than that. For those of you who are here on the live show today, I have an even better deal. I'm going to put that in there as well. Separate code. This one. Platinum-Jan-25. If you decide you want to go for a platinum membership, it's 40% off until the end of January. So just want to let you know about that. Now, one of the things that I like to do with my programs is end on a really, on a positive note. I have this thing that I call the Life Mastery Mantra. So I'm going to share that with you now. It's easy to remember and easy to practice. I invite you to do it first thing in the morning when you wake up. It goes like this. I gratefully forgive the imperfect being I have been in the past. I gratefully accept the magnificent being I am right now. I gratefully welcome the evolved being I am becoming in each new moment. Beautiful. Thank you again for joining me today. I wish you love, light, and blessings on your continuing journey. So I'll see you next time on Magnificence in Motion. Bye-bye.
Namaste.